Today, we're going to be talking about how legal can stop being a bottleneck. That's probably not a very comfortable phrase to hear about yourselves, even though you've probably heard it before. But the concepts that we're going to talk about today are actually going to be quite specific, and we're going to be talking about the things that actually slow legal down. I'm not going to be talking in a broad theoretical sense. I'm going to be talking about judgment and the things that we're missing from a context perspective that do slow us down and do actually turn us into a bottleneck. And I'm also going to be talking about how you can find resolutions to that. Before I begin, I just want to say that this session is meant to be interactive. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the chat or the Q&A. Dory, who is our marketing ops person in the background, who is responsible for this webinar and its creation and all of our webinars. She's amazing. She will be in the background and she will be answering any questions that you might have that she can answer. Any others that she can't answer, she'll pass on to me during the session. So as I said, feel free to interact and ask questions. And if someone asks a broader question to the broader community that's here today, feel free to respond. We've built a really amazing collaborative community at Simple Docs and Law Insider. And so if you have observations that you want to share about something that I've said, or if someone asks a question that you think you can answer from your experience, you're probably better positioned than I am to answer it because you are coming from a place of experience within your role. So please do feel free to share in the chat. Okay. And also the recording will be shared after this session for anyone who wants to know that. So I'm gonna kick off. You did not become a lawyer to be a bottleneck. It's not a nice feeling when you're in-house in particular and people are referring to you as a bottleneck. You became a lawyer so that you can protect a business. You probably moved from a law firm, if you did that, into an in-house environment in order to be part of that business and enable its growth, to be strategic, to make difficult decisions, to support your C-suite and your leadership, to make decisions when they are thinking about how to move within a market that is, ever growing. And so you don't want to be a bottleneck. You definitely don't want to be unpopular. You don't want to be the person that's stopping things from moving. But somehow you're always busy. And lawyers are some of the most under-resourced teams in any organization. This isn't in the slides, but I was doing some research the other day, and I found out that the average is 1 to 270, one lawyer to 270 employees. That's a ridiculous ratio because imagine the amount of business, the amount of queries that you're ingesting as a single lawyer in a business from the broader team within your business. I mean, no wonder you're always busy. And so the volume is not going down. There's more contracts, there's more jurisdictions that you need to worry about, particularly as any organization grows and expands. People expect things more quickly. They're probably looking at AI tools and going, oh, ChatGPT answered that really quickly. Why can't you? That's probably the most frustrating thing ever for you. And I'm sure that lots of you are experiencing this. And there are higher stakes because, of course, it's an ever more complex world in which we operate. So legal teams are being asked to move with the speed of at the speed of business, with the same headcount, the same tools, and the same way of doing things. And of course, that's not going to work. Legal is scaling. Legal is going to scale. The world is growing. The world of business is growing and it's expanding and it's becoming ever more global. And there's usage of tools, particularly AI, that means that businesses are going to grow much more quickly because they can do more with what they have, right? So legal is going to scale. The question is whether you're going to scale your team intentionally or whether you're going to wait for it to happen organically. And my advice is be intentional with what you're doing and be intentional with where you want to scale to and how you want to get there, because the tools are there, the thinking is there, and it's just about understanding it, embracing it, and moving forward with purpose. So the business wants speed. And it is frustrating to hear from a business that you need to get this contract done in particular. I'm talking about contracts in particular because that's one area where deals will slow if legal doesn't work fast enough. So the sales team is pushing, they need to get things done before the end of the quarter. That's coming up next month, or this month rather. You're going to get this pressure at the end of this quarter. But legal does not have the context that it needs at its fingertips at the point in time at which it needs it. So every contract review is a judgment call. And at the moment, that judgment lives in one or two people's head within your team. So that's not a people problem, that's a system problem. And what I mean by this is that when you've got a team of lawyers and they're all looking at contracts, you will often find that the more junior people or the newer people that are coming on board are constantly asking questions of the more senior lawyers. So the reason contracts in particular are slower than you might want is not because you haven't got enough people to read those contracts. It's not because lawyers are slow readers. It's because the judgment and the context lives in a concentrated number of heads. It lives with the people that have been there the longest, or who are the most senior, or that have the most experience in that specific area. So I think that there is just a misjudgment around how we're going to scale legal. It's not by getting more people on board. If those people don't have the context that the few people have and who are able to answer the questions that are the questions that are slowing down the contract review process, it's going to be very difficult for you to scale your team. So I'm sure that you can relate to this. If you can't relate to it right now in your career, you can probably remember a time where you could, but you're reviewing a clause. The question is not, what does the market do? The question is, what have we done in the past? So yes, it's relevant to know, is this normal? But actually, what have we done in the past? That's something that we don't really know. And again, I'm talking about a system failure here. So the capability to make a judgment call when you're reviewing a contract, and as I said, this is in particular to contracts, but it kind of fits with other scenarios as well, is the fact that there is institutional knowledge that people amass in their minds that they never document. And it's very difficult to document decisions at scale, right? So when you're reviewing a contract, yes, it's interesting to know what's normal. Yes, you can probably pick up the phone and ask a law firm friend whether this kind of liability cap is standard for an MSA in this industry, in this jurisdiction, for the nature of this type of business. Maybe you can access Law Insider to find out en masse what the data says. But what the real gap is, and I think there is a significant gap, and I'm going to talk about the layers of context that we actually leverage when we're making these decisions shortly. But one of the most important gap rather is the fact that it is almost impossible to know what the organization has done in the past. And this keeps happening because the knowledge that should be guiding every decision is stuck. So the reason we're bottlenecks, again, is not because we're slow. It's not because we're not good at drafting quickly. It's not because we can't get through contracts. It's because we do not have the context that we need at the point at which we need to make a decision. You can know that in the market, this is normal. Say you're a new lawyer, you've just joined a business. You know that this liability cap is normal for this type of agreement. You might have a playbook if you're lucky, and you can open up the playbook and you can take a look. But if you're getting pushback from the other side, what you really want to know is, what have we agreed to in the past? And what was our rationale for agreeing to that and potentially deviating from our policy, which is your playbook? And this just historically has been impossible to surface, particularly at the point in time at which you are reviewing an agreement. And so what the bottleneck really means, again, is it's not about speed, it's about decisions depending on individuals. We're creating lots of single points of failure. The escalation becomes a default. So a lawyer, particularly a new lawyer or junior lawyer, is not ever going to be self-sufficient unless they're there for years on end and they just absorb the knowledge by osmosis. So context is reconstructed every single time, and authority remains unclear. And this is why legal feels slow. So you're not slow because you haven't got enough people. I mean, you may well not have enough people, but that's not the main reason. It's because when you need to make decisions, you can't do it quickly. And if we look at the escalation loop, senior time is consumed by repeat questions. You're suppressing junior autonomy, deals slow down, and then confidence erodes. And I've had that myself when I was a junior lawyer. When I used to go into an organization and I'd ask one lawyer one thing and they'd give me an answer, and I'd ask another senior lawyer the same thing and I'd get a different answer. And I'm like, what do I do? I'm not sure. I don't know if you've ever had this experience in the past. You might get conflicting messages from people, or you might get a message, but you're not quite sure why they're making that decision and what the rationale is. And so your confidence will erode with time, and that's not good for empowering new people and helping them to get more efficient and effective. And of course, you get drift. So you get an exception that you make under pressure. You don't document that exception. That kind of becomes the informal norm. And then the policy, your playbook, no longer matches practice. And there's no audit trail to show that that's happening at scale. So this is problematic because you're creating gaps in your institutional knowledge where you're not communicating to anyone why you're making these decisions and how. And so speed is not the real problem. Most AI tools in particular, so when someone's trying to solve this problem with headcount, they realize that, headcount can only go so far because if I'm not documenting these decisions, is that if I haven't got the ability to speed up the process, then, an AI tool that promises faster review, faster redlining, faster drafting is not going to be the answer, because legal was never slow because lawyers read slowly. Legal is slow because we do not have access to the right information at the right point in time. I'm going to pause there. I'd love to hear from anyone in the comments whether they get what I'm saying, whether they've had similar experiences in the past, whether, the penny is dropping in that the speed and the thing that lots of AI tools are trying to solve and the thing that they're actually selling, or the promise of speed through additional headcount, is not necessarily the problem. It's the fact that the way that legal teams are designed is inherited, right? In-house legal was never actually deliberately designed. There isn't a clear blueprint on how in-house legal needs to be designed. We've taken the law firm model and we've, in a way, implanted it into in-house. Historically, that's what's happened. And lawyers are not trained in how to in how to document this knowledge or how to access that knowledge at a point at which we need it. So this lack of deliberate design, and this is what I meant at the beginning where I said legal is going to scale, it's up to you whether you do it intentionally, is that this is a point in time, it's an inflection point, because AI and the things it's promising and the things people are wanting, not just lawyers, but the broader business, are surfacing gaps in the way that we are designed as a function that we cannot fill unless we see those gaps and design for them. So I'm just going to head to the comments to see what you guys are saying. Okay, I'm glad that it's resonating, because I think it's quite a deep issue that we have, and it's quite a systemic problem that we're not really talking about. All we're talking about is, oh, this AI tools are going to be are going to make me review a document faster because it's going to be able to pinpoint any areas that I need to address, and then it's going to be able to draft me a red line really quickly. But that's not the point, because if the red line that you're getting or the issue that it's spotting is not aligned with how you want to work, the result is that you will not trust the output. The output will be wrong for you. So what these tools need is context. And how do you get context? You need to gather it and you need to feed it either to the tool that you're working with or to the lawyer in the form of knowledge in a way that's structured. So the bottleneck is not you, right? It's not a capability problem. And I think again, like this is not something that we really talk about. It's not about you being faster at your job. It's not about the junior lawyer being upskilled more quickly. It's not that the lawyer's not good at reviewing the contract. It's a structural problem. So the knowledge is not accessible. Context is totally fragmented, and decisions rely on memory and instinct, which are often wrong, right? Because we're human. Knowledge is fragmented. So where knowledge lives today is in three predominant areas. This is particularly with regard to contracts. So the first is market precedent, what the market is doing. You can find this in external databases like Law Insider. And one of the reasons, the main reasons that Simple Docs acquired Law Insider is because it has this intel. And this is unique to the market, right? We are the only company that has been amalgamating contracts and passing those into individual clauses that you can then access. What that gives us is really valuable data around what's standard. And I know that that's actually quite an emotive term because we hate it when the other side tells us, but this is market standard, because there's no way you can look to verify that. And it kind of puts you on the back foot because you're like, hold on, do you have knowledge that I don't have? How do you know that for sure? You're saying it with such confidence and I don't. I'm a lawyer. I'm going to question that. I don't believe that. Also, market standard is contextual again, because it applies to different jurisdictions or industries or values of contract differently. So I want to question whether that's market standard. But having access to an enormous body of data that tells us what the patterns are across types and groups of contracts is really useful information. And when I was in-house, I did have a tendency to pick up the phone and call my law firm partner friend and ask them if something was market standard and if this is something that they often see. So it's important to know. What I'm acknowledging is that it's imperfect information, but that's okay because it's a very good indicator about something, about whether something is normal or not, and whether the thing that you're introducing into a contract is creating unnecessary friction, because that industry is very used to seeing that kind of provision in their agreements. The second is policy. So policy in this context means playbooks. Not many of us have playbooks. I used to create playbooks for a living, and 95% of in-house legal teams I spoke to did not have a playbook. And if they did, it wasn't a structured playbook. It was maybe a document with a load of knowledge in it. It was very difficult to kind of operationalize in your day-to-day. Of course, it's much easier to operationalize a playbook today, but they don't stop being static documents. So a playbook is a list of rules against which you're saying you want to review an agreement. So you might have an NDA playbook, and this might have 20 rules, and these are the things that you will accept or will not accept in an NDA that you're reviewing, particularly a third-party NDA. So it's very easy to operationalize that with AI. However, someone sat down and wrote that playbook at a point in time, and policy changes, and it changes through precedent and exceptions that you have agreed to in the past. And that's where your organizational precedent comes in. So this lives in the body of contracts that you've previously executed. They're the positions that you've actually taken as an organization. I'm not saying they're right. I'm saying that they're the reality. They are the reality of your organization's map of risk, right? Because that's what your contract database is. It is a database that either creates or mitigates risk in certain areas. And that's what you're actually doing. And that lives in your precedent, right? Because you've done it in the past. What you will often find is that the three do not match. So market precedent, what happens in the market, might be normal for the market, but it may not be right for your instance at that point in time. It's still valuable. Your policy says what you want to do. It's aspirational. It's kind of like your templates. They're what you aspire to do, but whether you do that in practice is a different story. But there's still a very good reference point because they're an accepted risk threshold if you've sat down and written a playbook. And then the third is your precedent. And this is where the nuance lives. And this is why I say that's the most important layer, because it's the piece of context that informs what you will and will not accept in certain instances, whether that be an exception or otherwise. So when decisions lack full context, what happens? So the impact is that junior lawyers will escalate unnecessarily because they're not confident. They read a playbook and they're like, yeah, cool, but these guys are pushing back and they're stronger than me. Can I make an exception? Because otherwise this deal's going to die. Let me ask a senior lawyer. Then what happens is that the senior lawyer becomes the institutional bottleneck. Do you see the structure that I'm talking about? Then the other thing that happens is this that your risk tolerance drifts quietly. It's not written down anywhere. It's not articulated. And of course, negotiations are relitigated. So whereas you might, if you had access to all this context, you might go, yep, in these instances with this party, we accept it because they're a strategic partner. Or when the value of the contract is X, we're happy to take more risk because it brings us more reward. So these rationales and these decisions are never documented and they're never accessed in a way that's structured. So you're just relitigating or rethinking why and whether you should do it. And that takes up time that you do not have. So I'm going to talk about the context stack framework now. We've put a lot of thought into this, and Simple AI, which is the tool that we offer, which is a Microsoft Word add-in that allows you to review contracts in accordance with your playbooks, your preferences, is a tool that's being used by over 4,000 teams at the moment. And what we've seen is that this was the exact gap that was missing. And this is the gap that we have now filled in order to provide a very rounded tool that would surface the context that we're all missing because it's totally buried in people's inboxes, databases, and drives. But what I found really interesting about this process is articulating the problem and the gap. So that's what I'm going to talk you through now. I'm going to talk you through the concept. So as I mentioned earlier, the first layer is market context. What does the market accept? And this needs to be granular. No one cares if you're saying this liability cap is standard. Standard for what, right? That's a bad argument. I want to know what industry you're talking about, what kind of deal you're talking about, what jurisdiction you're talking about. This is useful information because it gives you an indication, again, as to the level of friction you will be creating when you are including a provision and the other side is going to be reviewing it. So it's useful, right? But of course, it's insufficient. And the reason it's insufficient is because it just doesn't tell you what you need to know for your particular deal at that point in time. It's the easiest layer to access to an extent because we're talking about publicly filed or published contracts. Well, there are structured data sets like Law Insider. That's a structured data set, one of the only data sets on the market, by the way. And we have benchmarking tools. So we can use our technology to tell you whether a clause is standard for that type of agreement in that jurisdiction, for that value, and for that nature of agreement. So we've built that capability and we can surface that really easily. The next is policy. So again, what do our playbooks say? What are our thresholds? What fallback positions are we allowed to take? What do we need to escalate because we don't have a fallback position? What happens after fallback 3 is exhausted? Where do we go? So this is very structured, but it is often static because, as I said, you sit down, you do a playbook. It's quite a laborious exercise. You might be working with a technology company, like we have legal engineers that you would work with. But again, that's something that you do at a point in time. So it is static. You're not renewing it every month. You might look at it again in 6 months to a year. So it will never be a live view of your risk appetite. And they drift, right? You write them once, you don't always update them. You don't, this is really important, you don't capture negotiated outcomes. So what would be amazing is if you knew my playbook says this, but I actually accepted that. And I did that 5 times over the last 5 negotiations. Well, okay, are we going to change this playbook rule? Because if we don't, we're just going to be causing friction to our lawyers who are using this playbook to review a contract. And actually, the reality and the playbook are different. So we need to align the two. Having that real-time feedback would be an amazing enhancement to the way that we manage the systems that we use to review our contracts. And I really want to emphasize systems because, again, just going to go on a slight tangent here, but we've had a decade of tech that has tried to solve the problem with the wrong way of thinking. So if we look at CLM, contract lifecycle management systems, they took a very workflow-based approach. This happens, then do this, then do this, then do this. But legal is not a workflow. It's not event-based. You might want to think it's event-based and that it's clean and that if you do this, then you need to do this. And if this happens, then get that person to approve it. But, what happens when that person's out? Or what happens when that person's better friends with that person? Things that move outside of workflows and they're not as cleanly event-based as you'd like. And so what we need to be doing is creating systems that encourage the right behaviors. And I know that that's slightly kind of high level and potentially nebulous, and I'll be talking more about systems thinking in future webinars. But I think that systems thinking is something that we haven't been able to implement really until AI came to the fore in the way that we know it today, because it allows us to build those triggers that are much more dynamic and intuitive rather than trying to foresee every single event that might occur and then encode a reaction to that event occurring. So yeah, so playbooks capture intention, but they don't capture behavior. And this is a system flaw. And finally, we have organizational context. So what have we actually agreed to, under which commercial conditions, with who, is it Salesforce or is it the pencil supplier? What are we agreeing to with whom? That really matters. And what were the outcomes of that? This is the hardest layer to get into, right? Because this intel is distributed across contracts. Your contracts might live in your drive, your inbox, your desktop, in the drawer. This is the problem with this intel, that it's very difficult to get it all into one place to begin with. And then once you've got it all into one place, it's very hard to get structured metadata. With old school CLM, what you needed to do is ingest contracts, tell the CLM exactly what you want to tag, right? So if you wanted expiry date to appear in your table of your CLM, you need to tell it at the point of ingestion that that's what you want to look at. And then you need to train the AI to pick up the words that express expiry date, even if the language used is different. So I ran a lot of those projects where I had to ingest thousands of agreements at a time for some of the customers that I worked with. And ingesting that was A, painful, and B, always inaccurate. So we had a massive manual effort that had to happen after you ingested the contracts. And I'm sure that anyone who's implemented CLM understands and potentially has PTSD from what I'm saying. You have to ingest the contract, you have to tag them, and then why is it wrong? I don't understand what's going on here. I need to go and retrain the AI, and it was extremely painful. And then Max Schrems sues Facebook, and now you need to know about all of the contracts that contain a data sharing clause. And now what? You've got to do a remediation project where you need to go back and see if your CLM provider will work with you to try and extract this data because it's not dynamic. And so it doesn't work, it doesn't live with you, What you can do today with AI is a totally different scenario. You can ingest a bunch of contracts. You can tell it what metadata you want it will tag. You don't need to train it because it understands. It's much more contextual. So it knows that expiry date might be expressed in 5 different ways, but actually that's what it means. And it will pull that much more accurately without any tagging or training. None of that's needed. And then once it's out, if you now want to add another column to your table, you can totally do that. You can just ask it to look at all of your agreements, and then it can pull out the necessary information that you're looking for. Context matters, outcomes are not captured, and they're stored as documents rather than as decisions and live data. So this is the hardest layer, and it's the one that determines ultimate alignment. I'm seeing some comments come through. Dory, is there anything that I need to address?
I don't think so right now. This is great to hear, Caroline, that you've just subscribed to Simple AI and Sky. These are such great workflows that you're talking about. I think they're useful for everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for everyone who's sharing their experience there. Okay, the AI problem nobody talks about. So AI sounds really fluent, right? They're really good at flagging clauses, suggesting language, giving you a risk score sometimes, but they don't answer where did this come from, right? Very few tools, if any at all, give you an audit trail that show you where that context is coming from. Because most tools rely on large language models and they rely on a generic set of training data. It is impossible for the tools that you're using, most tools on the market, to trace back from this is the output that I'm giving you to, and this is why. Here's all of the records that I am using that have allowed me to come to this conclusion. The other thing that AI does is that it wants to win, right? So AI is the best student in class. You can think of it like that. But when it doesn't know the answer, it won't say so. It will make up something that sounds plausible, right? So it's really smart from that perspective. And so you might read something, feel confident that it's right because it sounds right. But then when you start to question it, there's holes and there's gaps. And I'm sure that for anybody that's used AI, this will be relatable because it's happened to me so many times. And it's like, whoa, imagine if I hadn't checked, right? Um, so they feel impressive, but they're actually quite shallow. So they will process text, score your clauses, suggest alternative language, but they do not know your authority structure, your history, and when you'd intentionally deviated from what you've said was your preferred position. They don't have the context. And actually, what lots of vendors have said in the past, it's, trust the model. They're a large language model. They've trained on so much data. Surely they know what they're talking about. This has always felt uncomfortable for the legal community because that does not align with the legal standard. Legal work needs to be, and we have been trained so hard on this, we're not going to stop doing this now. And anyone who has, some people have got into trouble for deviating from what they know is the legal standard. Legal work needs to be verifiable, absolutely defensible, and of course traceable. Because you can use AI tools to speed up your work and make it easier for you to do certain tasks. But at the end of the day, you're accountable, you're a lawyer. So no one's asking you to fully outsource everything that you do to an AI bot. Well, you can totally use it to augment the way that you operate. But the way that you're going to use it to really speed up the way you work is to get the context that you need in a way that you can trust. So confidence and provenance are two different things. The standard AI needs to be held to is the following. Can you trace a recommendation back to real contracts? And I'm going to show you an example of how we do it here. So here, where it says confidence score by Law Insider, 90, what this is it's taking, it's looking at a contract, it's looking at the clauses in the contract, and it's telling you that this language is commonly used when it comes to agreements of that type. If you click on see more, it will take you to the list of contracts that it's using to give you that benchmark. So if you wanted to interrogate it, with which many people do, many people that use our tools do interrogate it. We see it in when we capture the recordings of the anonymized recordings of people using our tool. Lots of them click in to see where this confidence score is coming from. And knowing that they can delve deeper into the contracts gives them a lot of confidence and trust in the outputs that we're providing. Can you verify the benchmark? Can you see your own historical positions? And can you defend the recommendation internally? If push comes to shove in the future, can you demonstrate why you made that decision and what you relied on in order to come to that conclusion? If not, you're just operating on a suggestion rather than actual intelligence. LLMs are amazing. AI tools are incredible. They can really support the way that we work. But if you can't link the output back to something tangible, you are just operating on the AI's intelligence. And this has been the biggest bone that lawyers have had to pick with AI since it came to market. Lawyers could not trust it because they could not see where this stuff was coming from. And as great as AI sounds, as fluent as it sounds, there was nowhere that they could go to get the confidence that they needed that they were making the right decision. It's all a black box. And you hear claims about magic, with some legal AI tools. It's not magic. It's coming from somewhere. The question is whether it's coming from a reliable source a source that belongs to you and a source that you can actually trace back to and inspect yourself to make sure that it's the right one. And that's really where your accountability lies, is making sure that that's happening. So what stops legal from being a bottleneck? It's a decision infrastructure. So instead of, I mean, we can all think, and the last webinar I did was about the 5+1 optimization pillars. If you're interested in that, there is a recording on YouTube. Um, but there we're talking about some really tangible things that you can do and ways that you can use AI to speed up the way that you work and make it more effective, not just more efficient, but more effective. What I'm suggesting here is that you start thinking about the way that you make judgment calls and the way that you make decisions. It's not this nebulous thing. It's not this, you know, instinctive way of working. It feels instinctive, but there are patterns, right? There are patterns to the things that we do. There are patterns to the way that we work. And AI can help us surface those patterns. So if we can make the policy thresholds visible, the market range visible, the organizational history visible, and also look at where the deviation patterns occur and why, and we can do that at the point at which we are making decisions, not just us, not just the senior lawyers who are responsible for drafting the playbooks, but everyone in the team, then that's exactly how you scale legal. And if you want to take it a step further, the tools that you're using, as long as they have this capability to give you a trace back to provenance, you could even insource some of the work to people within your business that are not lawyers. There is no reason for which every single NDA in an organization needs to be reviewed by a lawyer. If an NDA is hitting certain things and not hitting certain other things, then, I mean, this might be uncomfortable, but a salesperson is perfectly capable of doing that, right? If we give them the right guardrails and the right tools and the right escalation routes, this is how we scale legal. We become part of the DNA of the organization by surfacing the patterns that have been hidden in documents and in dusty PDFs and in databases that are disconnected from your day-to-day workflow. And we embed them into the DNA of the business so that the business and your lawyers can make decisions more confidently, more quickly, and without relying on the one or two senior lawyers within a business that hold all the institutional knowledge in their heads. What changes when context is embedded is that junior lawyers decide faster, senior lawyers will be escalated to less, their time's freed up, negotiations are much more defensible, and standards will stop drifting. What this looks like in practice is this. I'm not going to show you the tool today, but if anyone does want a demo so that we can show you how this works in practice, we're going to drop a link now in the comments. And Dory, can we pop up a poll
Yep,
to
I do have the
see?
poll ready.
We can show you how this works in practice. These are just some screenshots of the tool in practice. And this is exactly the thing. This route for AI is exactly the thing that is going to accelerate the way that we work in a very meaningful way, right? Because as I said, I think the barrier to AI adoption for legal as a very particular industry was this lack of trust, right? If you're a marketing person and you're writing an email to your audience, you don't need to trace back to a source. You can rely on the AI for the output. If you're using the AI to get a financial forecast or do some work around operations, leaning on best practice, even if the AI doesn't link back to a real source, it doesn't matter if the output works, right? But for legal, it's very different. We rely on precedent and we rely on, or we should be relying on the precedent that relates to our organization. This is particular to the in-house legal community. Of course, this is also the same for law firms, but predominantly in-house. Your institutional knowledge is so buried at the moment that it's very hard to surface it in a way that's going to give you that decision acceleration power. Okay. As I said, legal is scaling whether you intend it to or not. AI is already in your workflow. A lot of you in the comments are saying that you're already using it. Some of you are using Simple AI, which is amazing, and thank you for doing that. Um, and your business is already moving faster. Everyone's using AI in business, right? I know very few people that don't use AI. I don't think I know anyone who doesn't use AI in their day to day. People are fully reliant on it. I know that I am. I do not remember a time pre-AI. It's like pre-baby. Who was I? I don't know. AI is honestly something that everyone relies on a lot. And if they're moving faster, the business is going to be moving faster, and legal needs to be move faster in order to support that. Because legal is not just there to be a risk mitigator, it's there to enable business. And that means flexing with the way that business is evolving and finding ways to cope with the demand, the increased demand that we will be seeing. And it's just going to get faster and faster and faster. And there's just going to be more and more and more. So we should be thinking about the blueprint for legal. And when we're thinking about the blueprint for legal, I think a really good place to start with is how do I make decisions? Because that's my value, right? It's my ability to make decisions that are informed and that are aligned with where the business is going and what I know about the business. How do I make those decisions? How can I codify that process? And how can I get all the context and information that I need at the right point in time into the hands of the right people so that I can get rid of the bottlenecks? Where are the bottlenecks? Why are they there? And I guarantee that most real bottlenecks are where the decisions are being made. And those decisions are so nuanced and so particular that we only trust a very small number of people to make them. And those people are inundated, they are the most thinly stretched in any team. And then the junior lawyers or the other lawyers in the business that don't have this institutional knowledge are feeling disempowered. And I've been there. I'm sure you have at some point in your careers, particularly when you were first starting out. You'd see these lawyers and they were so busy, and you're like, well, I'm not that busy, so please give me something because I'm so eager to learn and to prove myself and to get really good at this. I want to master this. Please trust me with some stuff. And they can't because they can't articulate the context that is buried in so many different artifacts in their minds, in their drawers, and having the capability to now surface that and give it to the right people at the right time is exactly the thing that's going to enable legal to scale. Okay, so if this feels familiar and you recognize the escalation patterns that I'm talking about, then the next step is not just any other AI tool, it's your decision infrastructure. So just to recap, legal is not slow. It's not slow per se. It just lacks accessible context. Speed without the structure does create drift. That drift creates risk in the organization. You've got people making inconsistent decisions. And then structure without accessibility creates bottlenecks. So the solution is embedded context into your legal team to begin with. And then as you scale and as you mature your legal function, embedding that into the broader organization as well. And of course, there are many AI tools out there, but choosing the right partner is key because designing legal it's an undertaking, and who you partner with matters. It's not just about getting an AI tool in your toolbox. It's not just about saying, I'm using AI to accelerate the work. It's about partnering with someone who really understands what you're going through and isn't just going to throw a load of sales resources at you to get you through the door. And when you're choosing a partner, it's important to understand what support they offer you. So this is not just, I'm not just pitching for Simple Docs, but we take legal engineering really, really seriously. And the reason is that, so I head up the legal engineering function. And prior to my role at Simple Docs as Chief Product Officer, I used to run a legal ops consultancy called TLB. And when I was running that, my job was to help teams adopt legal tech Back in the day when I was doing it, it was CLM. I say back in the day, it was 3 years ago. But it was to adopt legal tech. It was to choose the right tech, and then it was to implement the right tech, roll it out, and do the change management piece as well to get it into their organization. Choosing the tech, yes, there were some challenges, but it was quite easy. The implementation bit, the rollout, and predominantly the change management piece was the hardest. So you want a partner that really gets that and who's going to be with you for the whole duration, not just until you get sold the tool and then off you go on your way. You want someone who's going to give you best practice for this and who is going to give you a blueprint. Because if you're a busy lawyer, and you're looking for an AI tool, it might be the last thing you need now to drive the whole process by yourself without anyone guiding you and taking stuff off your plate. So things like creating playbooks, they take time, particularly if you haven't got something that you're working with already. If you're working with a partner that has a legal engineering team, they're going to help you extract all that stuff that's in your head, in your contracts, and put it into an AI readable format. They're going to help you test it. They're going to help you make sure that the rules are firing in the way that you need them to, that they're nuanced enough, that the fallback hierarchy is structured. This is a big undertaking. And so you do need a partner that's really going to understand your needs. They're going to understand your contracts. They're going to understand how you work. So our whole legal engineering team is made up of lawyers, and we will support you end to end to get all of this into your own workflows. The other thing is the contextual bit. So if you're trying to get your contracts to give the tool the context, we will help with that whole piece. So the way we operate is that our whole product philosophy is very, very much aligned with context is king or queen, right? Because if we don't have the right context, we're not going to give you the right suggestions. So we will also make sure that you're giving us the right context. We're supporting you with that whole piece of taking all your contracts, collating them, and then we will ingest them, QA them, make sure that everything works. So just for anyone who doesn't know, we have two products. We have Simple AI, which is a Microsoft Word add-in. And this is where you either use it as a co-pilot, where you can ask it questions about your contracts, ask it to make very specific surgical changes to your agreement. But you can also ask it to benchmark a clause against what's market. You can also ask it to benchmark a contract against your precedents, your playbook, and what's market so that you can see all of it together. And you can then make decisions much more quickly. In order to feed it the context from your organizational precedent, we also have an AI repository, and this is where you would store your agreements in order to give the tool the context. If you already have a CLM, then we may integrate with that if you want us to, or you have a capability to upload your contracts that are relevant to the deal in question via Simple AI. So if anyone wants a demo of that, Tori, can we just pop up that poll one more time for anyone that missed the last poll? But if you do want a demo, then please let us know and we will reach out and offer you a demo so that you can see this in action.
Electra, one quick
Question,
question here,
please.
mostly because I'm not quite as familiar with all of the law stuff, but would you say that there's application to an estate planning firm with Simple AI? I think probably depending on what kind of contracts they're
It
working
depends on
with.
your use case. It's less about the nature of the work that you do and more about your use case. So if your use case is I have a list of rules against which I want to review an agreement, then we can totally do that. If it's I just want to summarize an agreement, then we can probably do that, but there might be other tools that work better for you. So it really depends on your use case. During a demo, we can talk through your use cases, and we're always very honest with the people that we talk to. If it's something that we don't think we can do perfectly well, we will not waste your time. So feel free to book that demo. Okay. Any questions that anyone has about anything that we've spoken about today? Anything that I can help shed light on? Anything that's not directly related to what we talked about today, but you're curious about? I see a comment from Demi saying you'd be impressed at how many companies are not using AI, predominantly enormous organizations or firms in traditional sectors. To them, how AI works is best a mystery, at worst, black magic. Yeah, I'm sure that there are lots of organizations that don't use AI. I don't know anyone that doesn't use AI at all in any parts of their lives. So, in your personal life, if you're not using an AI tool, I would be impressed at that, at least for your own personal stuff. Um, Mashumi, how does the 5+1 framework interact with this? So yeah, please go and watch that talk because I go into a lot of depth around a framework that you might want to think about as you're scaling legal. So yeah, please take a look at that, and I'm very happy to have another chat about that. Can it be integrated into Conga, or would manual feeding of contracts be required? We can do both. So we can either manually feed it, the contracts. So if you're just interested in a small number of contracts because you're only dealing with, a specific type of agreement, then we can do that. If you wanted to integrate into Conga, we can create that integration for you. So yeah, please reach out for a demo and we can talk about that integration piece as well. How do you gather the information from other teams? For example, need to know what sales has sold. Did they give a reduction? What is the scope of work? But you do not want everyone to have need a license on Simple AI. How do you do this? So, Sarah, the way we do this is that it depends on what you want to use Simple AI for. If you want sales to review an agreement first, then they would need a license. But historically, we've given those licenses at a much lower rate because we know that they're not the power users of it. We know that they're not getting the value that legal is getting out of Simple AI. So we would price that slightly differently. If you just wanted to ingest that information in the repository, then at the moment we have a single fee for the whole organization. So it's not on a per license basis. I believe that pricing is changing, but if you're just interested in surfacing patterns and not actually reviewing contracts, you will be able to do that with our AI repository, and the whole organization can access that for a flat fee at the moment. Can you send me an AI gen summary of this 1, 2 paragraphs of the GC, please? So we will be circulating this recording, Dory. I think the transcript goes with it, so you'll be able to pull that. Yeah. Great. I'm glad that everyone who's commented at least has seen value in this webinar. I'm really interested in systems thinking. I'm writing a lot about it. I also have a Substack. If you're interested in reading more, then Dory, if we could drop the link to my Substack here, then people can sign up. You can hear more about these thoughts that I have and how we're putting those into practice when it comes to the AI tools that we're building. This is all a very new space. And so I think it's so important for us to share the thoughts that we're having, the ideas that we're having, and the workings, because it's all maturing and it's all growing daily. So yeah, I'm always really happy to speak to anyone who's been triggered by the stuff that I've said. If there's anything that you wanted to talk about, please feel free to reach out. And yeah, thank you all so much for joining. As I said before, if you did want to see our tool in more detail, then reach out to the team. And thank you all for being here today. Much appreciated.